Elon Musk in the US. He's Vatnik, isn't he?
Yes!
Definition from my book of a Vatnik is somebody who spreads and or supports Kremlin propaganda or Kremlin viewpoints. Putin was in cover of a tabloid 333 times. So for me, this is unbelievable. Why are we giving Putin so much space in our media?
Is there someone whom you you would classify as the evil genius?
How do you recognize who is a pro-Kremlin propagandist or a Vatnik? They never speak about Russia.
Hello, I'm Jenny Klochko. You're watching my podcast. It's platform for guest stories beyond your daily newsfeed. Today, it's something away and actually not, because propaganda been long before Russian propaganda, long before the full-scale invasion, long before Crimea annexation. It's actually a couple centuries, but it's always changing, reshaping, depends on the political agenda. And today, my guest today is Pekka Kallioniemi. He created Vatnik Soup, and through his project, he is defending the truth and fighting against the false narratives, the Russian propaganda, which planted in different countries through different speakers. Let's have a look at this creation together. Pekka, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you for finding time for us to talk. I was looking forward to it. And as soon as I found out of Vatnik Soup, I was so excited, because propaganda is, no matter what you do, what topic you researching in terms of geopolitics or war in Ukraine, it's always aspect of propaganda.
Of course, yeah. I sometimes, like previously said, that information war usually precedes conventional war. So you start often with information war and hybrid operations before you actually start a conventional war. And that is very much evident when we look at Ukraine, for example.
Do you have some similarities between Ukraine and Finland, and especially Finland, with traumatized with the Soviet war and attempt to, and actually they did see some territory in Finland. Do you have some do you find like, oh, we had it as well, or it's totally different cultural background and obviously different historic moments?
So the thing with Russia is that they are not very good at coming up with new stuff. So there's a lot of similarities between the Winter War, the start of Winter War in 1939, and the start of the war in Ukraine in 2014, and of course the full-scale invasion in 2022. So a little bit historical background on the Winter War. It started when Russians or the Soviets shelled their own soldiers in the town of Mainila. So they shot their own soldiers and then they blamed the Finnish people for it. So that was basically the casus belli. That was the reason, the reasoning for the invasion. And of course, they had these old tropes of basically denazification of Finland. So they said that it's Finland is being ruled by fascists and it needs to be liberated. It might sound quite familiar to most Ukrainians.
Absolutely. And for me it's also because I was in the UK. I based in London since 2011. And I see the shift. You see, in 2014, and even at the beginning of 2022, when it comes, for example, Azov regiment, or anybody was marked by Russian propaganda as Nazi, British media was like, oh, no, 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 we don't want to look at it. We don't want actually to question it. Is it true? It has anything to do with Nazis. They didn't want to touch. They actually believed it. And I remember when we were doing documentaries and investigations in 2014, when sort of annexation was happening, the invasion to the east just about to happen, and the reliable source of information for respectable British media was Russia Today website. And I'm not joking. this is how all it's changed and how it's different now. So yeah, and how strong.
Yeah, and if we go back, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of this demonization of Ukrainian leadership already back in 2013, 2014 was the demonization of like saying that there's a huge problem with far right actors and so on and politicians, and they were basically just using one or two groups as an example, the right sector and then later the Azov. Uh, but basically their popularity when it comes to politics was up to 2%. It's marginal. It's very minimal, and they didn't hold any political positions. It was mostly hooligans and so on that were involved. But it's just, I think it shows that how you can just demonize the whole country by just picking one marginal group and then just kind of pushing news around that. And I think it's, as you said, it's sad that media outlets like BBC just took this propaganda as is and then promoted, or The Guardian and so on. I mean, of course, we need to be aware of far right elements in any country, and especially if they are extremist, violent groups. But I think there should have been a bit more fact checking during that time when it comes to these groups.
Absolutely. But you mentioned BBC. I know from um, my sources in terms of BBC, there are two issues with BBC. There's one issue, they still give sort of like what Peskov says or what Putin says. Everyone knows they're gonna lie, and they still, you know, give the platform for this lie. This first, the second one is more dangerous and more difficult. People who is in the top positions or influential position within the BBC, all their life they were admiring great British culture, they were learning Russian, and basically all their existence about this thing. And now they, when they have touch, for example, to the material, like what happened in Bucha. Oh, someone was removing the toilets and the washing machines next door. Who was removing? Oh, the bombs were falling from the sky. Oh, was it the weather condition, the bombs, or actually someone aiming to drop it? You see? And those things, for example, like violence, war crimes, it becomes sort of normalization. Oh, it's the outcomes of the war. Or the victimizations, like one of the people on your wall, the list of bad girls and boys, Anastasia Trofimova, who did this Russian documentary. She used to work for Russian state TV, like victimization of those who actually committed all this violence, all these atrocities. It's like, oh, our poor boys, oh, they're so cold in the trenches. You see, and it's just, oh, how can you take it? How can you not question it?
Yeah, just to continue on that, I had to dig up this reference. So, a last in 2023, Putin was at the cover of yellow press papers or tabloids. So Putin was in cover of a tabloid 333 times. So for me this is unbelievable. Why are we giving Putin so much space in our media when you basically cannot trust anything the man says? Why are we giving the master bullshitter so much coverage? And also a lot of this stuff is just rumors. It's just hearsay. So it's not really news. I mean, tabloids are tabloids. And to be fair, in Finland, tabloids are actually quite high quality. I mean, if you compare to the likes of Sun or, Daily Mail or and so on, they are actually quite high quality, and there are really good journalists there in Finnish tabloids. There are two big ones. But I mean, just giving up so much coverage to one of the most barbaric leaders in the world right now, I don't see any point in that. But I mean, I know why they do it, because they sell the papers. Basically, who reads tabloids in Finland today? It's elderly. So what do you see on these covers is Putin or some new diseases and how to prevent them. So basically, it's that they cater for the elderly people, but still, it's uh, this is not a good approach in my view.
Do you know, being honest with you, since I started my podcast, I noticed and checking what other colleagues in the same field doing. As long as you put Putin's face on the cover of the video, and as long as you mention something, Putin struggling, Putin desperate, or whatever Putin is doing, you have more viewers and more attracts attention. It is the selling point. How sad it is to realize they just fight for the clicks, fight for the attention. That's the sad reality. Coming back to your wall, it feels like job for life. And as a journalist myself, I know how the bits which brings excitement, inspiration, and energy, in this um, sometimes exhausting work. Do you feel most of the time inspired, exhausted? How do you manage? Because it requires so much, especially with your thorough attention to details, with looking, even when you mentioned Renat Akhmetov, Ukraine's the richest man, you even went back in 90s and brought back people who actually made him where he is at the moment. I mean, the first money, the first connections, and all of those, his criminal past, some people claim. So, how do you feel doing this work?
Um, I think I feel exhausted when I'm not doing this work, but I'm extremely, like, how can I describe it? I think it's like hyper focus. When I start working on a soup, on a Vatnik soup, I am so focused. I'm kind of living. I'm going inside the experience, and I really live it very strongly. So that's like it's a real passion for me, because I've always been interested in history. I've always been interested in psychology and this kind of topics. So when I start doing research, I'm just like, I don't know. It's like a mode. I'm in the zone, or like a flow experience for me, where I'm just basically just thinking about the whole thing like 24/7. But once I'm done, I'm a bit exhausted. That's like the process for me. So it's a passion. I love doing it. Everything, all the Vatnik soups are basically done by me. I maybe get some references, but I write everything and so on. And it's been going on for how many years now? At least two, maybe three. And I love writing Vatnik Soup, so it energizes me. But also after the process, I'm quite exhausted. And of course, I've been doing it for such a long time, and it also kind of brings this shade of sometimes fear, because it has an impact. And we know what these authoritarian regimes like Russia are capable of. They have a huge network of spies and so on. So of course there's also a little bit of fear, but you cannot give into the fear, because I see the work as it's an important thing for me, and also probably for the society as a whole. So I just keep on doing it.
You mean fear for your own safety?
Of course, yeah, yeah. And
Do you have any threats or any messages, comments like makes you feel uncomfortable?
of course, I mean, I work in social media. It's like, even if you do TikTok videos with dances, you will get death threats. So it's a given that if you are on social media, you will be threatened at some point. Yeah, sure. But as I said, if I give into that fear, it will affect my work. It'll make it uh, worse to be in. So I don't want to think about it too much. Um, and also, the most of the feedback that I get is, of course, positive. So it also keeps me going.
Coming back to your wall, because it's the most impressive thing. And I noticed there are a bunch of people from different countries, obviously, but I was checking for Ukrainian list of bad boys and girls, and I noticed, I mean, there were oligarchs which tied close to Russian money, but I couldn't find Viktor Medvedchuk or his wife, and he was the one in the Ukrainian politics quite some time, and his ties with Vladimir Putin so close that Vladimir Putin is the godfather of his daughter. And I just remind those who not aware who is Medvedchuk. Medvedchuk was arrested after full-scale invasion. He tried to escape, and at the end he was exchanged for dozens of Ukrainian prisoners of war. I think it's many of them. There was the commanders of the Azov regiment, the defenders of Mariupol. So he's not there just because a lot of work and you have only two hands and one hand, or there's another reason for people like him.
It is there. It
I
is
missed it.
from
Oh.
December of 2022 already, so it's a bit old, quite old.
Ah,
Medvedchuk is there, and I think he's one of the nastiest guys out there, you know. He's doing all this right now. Have you heard of this Voices of Europe network? So
no.
it is a network that was overlooked by Medvedchuk. They channeled and sent money to European politicians so they would spread anti-Ukraine sentiments. It was discovered by a Czech intelligence agencies and Polish. And he's also running a disinformation network in Serbia now. So he's still very much active. And I think most of the stuff that he still does is unknown to the Western people. But yeah, he there. I think there was a reason. Like if we look back to the at the beginning of the war, the main reason for the invasion, full-scale invasion, was denazification, and the embodiment of so-called Nazis was the Azov, is it
Mhm.
regiment or brigade? I forgot, but anyway, but once Medvedchuk was captured, Putin was ready to exchange Medvedchuk to all these Azov leaders who were basically the bad guys, the reason for the war. He was still ready to exchange Medvedchuk for like 200 or like a big group of people. I
Yeah.
mean, I think there was like over 200
And 80, I
prisoners of
think. Yeah,
war
280.
exchanged. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like this kind of it raises a question if the reason for this full-scale invasion was denazification, why did Putin exchange back these Nazi leaders and exchange them to Medvedchuk? It's because Medvedchuk is a very important key in this whole disinformation network and media network that Putin and the Kremlin is running. So yeah, he's a very important guy and very like probably at the very top when it comes to this.
Yeah, he was the evil of Ukrainian politics. And I came across him in early 2000 when I was a journalist in Ukraine for television. And it's just, he has this natural thing which you feel very uncomfortable. You know, there are people very likable. They come into the room and you just, they haven't done anything and you like them already. You know, and it's quite opposite, 100% opposite. And he was trying, you know, he has this beautiful wife and she's a propagandist as he was, and they had lots of money, invest all of the, basically, objectively, all attributes to people feel positive about him, but somehow they never did. You know, there's in politician, there's people who electable and non-electable. That's kind of thing.
Yeah.
Non-electable.
I look when I looked into Medvedchuk's past, I was like, he should be probably running the country, but then I read somewhere that he's extremely disliked by many Ukrainians. Like he's not a very popular guy, so he's basically now working in the background, in the shadows, because he's not very likable in general.
That was the intention when he was the head of the president's administration when President Kuchma was at the power. And this was the sort of like the epic moment with his romance, because Oksana, his wife, the TV presenter, she's stunning, gorgeous lady, and she became sort of known and popular before they got married, and for both of them it's second marriage. So it looked like they preparing to be the president and the first lady, because she's the beauty number one, and it never worked. And then was 2004, Orange Revolution, everything. And since then, sort of like, he was the guy behind the scenes, very influential, flooded with money, everything he could touch on, but there was no chance for him to be. Have you noticed these narratives, the shift of narratives? Obviously, there is geographical points which Russian propaganda pushing. For example, in Germany, they're going through pro-Russian German intellectuals and pushing Ukraine to peace negotiations from day one of full-scale invasion. And I was seeing even in my comments like, oh, there's nothing wrong to be ruled by Putin. It's just you just have a peaceful life. Many cities will be saved. People have no idea what does it mean living under the Russian occupation like we had in Soviet time, and you have no right for your identity. So that's in Germany. But do you notice, for example, the Russian narratives targeting Ukrainians under Ukrainian sort of control, the Ukrainians on the occupied territories, and as soon as like different political shift, for example, right now everything in the context potential peace negotiations. And what I notice from bad Ukrainians and those who spread in Russian narratives within, and they are popular, they saying, "Oh, Ukraine should compromise." It's not Putin should compromise. Oh, it's Ukraine should compromise because Putin will never ever do this and back off and this and that. Do you notice things like that?
Yes. Long time ago, I said that I asked this question, how do you recognize who is a pro-Kremlin propagandist or a Vatnik? They never speak about Russia. They never speak about the Russian leadership. They focus on Ukraine. They focus on the negative sides of Ukraine. It's corrupt. It's led by Nazis. It's bioweapon labs. Whatever works in that media space at the time. They focus on that because if they start talking about Russia, uh, they cannot really come up with very positive stuff. Like if you put it under a magnifying glass, you see that it's full of viruses and bacteria and it's just infested with bad things. So they just decide, okay, let's not talk about Russia. Not talk about the Kremlin, and let's focus on demonizing Ukraine, Ukrainians, not Ukrainians per se, but Ukrainian leadership, because this is a very see, it's a very popular approach when it comes to the Kremlin. Is they say that the population of Ukraine is innocent. They are just being ruled by these ruthless dictators or the regime, and they did the same thing with Finland in not during the Second World War. They said that Finnish government has been overtaken by fascists, by like authoritarians, and Finnish people do not want that. They want to be free. So they started a shadow government in I think in St. Petersburg or Moscow with Finnish people, and they said that this is the actual government of Finland, and the government that is governing in Finland is false. It's the Nazis. It's the evil embodiment of everything that's wrong in the world. And this is what Russia and the Kremlin loves to do. Is okay. It's not the Ukrainian people are gentle. They are very like they are good, but it's the Zelensky regime that's the evil, and they are corrupt. Zelensky bought Hitler's old car and so on. So it just goes on and on. And yeah, it's a very similar approach with what they've done in the past too.
Do you realize I was um, preparing for our interview and listening to when you were having conversations with other journalists, and you mentioned, oh, Finland lost the war and this is the trauma, blah, 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 blah. And I was thinking, oh, is it? And I went back and I was checking. Do you know why? Because in Ukraine, since the full-scale invasion, it was the um, the resistance of Finnish people, the way how it was approached. And I had subconsciously thinking like, oh, Finland won. That was the victory. And now it's just as a sort of was published the autobiography of Mannerheim, and so these lots of military getting inspiration and reading and going and sort of references, getting inspired by the Finnish fight with Russians. So it's it's something you went a bit earlier, we're going through now, and hopefully it will be with a happy end, and everything's going to be paid off. Do you notice this admiration and appreciation of the fight of the Finnish people?
Yes. I mean, there are a lot of legendary stories that are being told, that are being spread by Ukrainian fighters from Azov, for example. I think, is it Denis Proporenko? Sorry if I pronounce.
Prokopenko, yeah.
Yeah. I think he is a huge fan of people who fought in the Winter War, and I think his grandfather, I may be mistaken, I hope I'm not. I think his grandfather fought in the Winter War. So it's like a big story there. And I mean, there are legends like the White Death, Simo Häyhä, who killed hundreds of a sniper who killed
Oh yes,
hundreds of.
yes. I watched about him documentary.
Yeah, and there will be two movies made of, like, Finnish movie and American movie made of him, and a lot of like when the Winter War happened, it was one of the coldest winters in the history, like minus 42 Celsius, and unfortunately, a lot of the soldiers that were sent by Stalin to fight against Finland were Ukrainians, and they were completely unprepared for the weather. A lot of them froze to death, and it was just very, very tragic event as a whole. But it's still uh, a lot of stories are being told, and it's almost being like mystified, and the whole struggle. Even though eventually we lost around 10% of Finnish lands to the Soviets. Uh, and but I still feel like most Finnish people think that we actually won the war, so we consider it being like a win. Uh, and yeah, I mean the thing, I think one more thing to mention is that the Soviets or the Russians never bothered to do any improvements around these captured regions. So if we look at all these regions that the Soviets or Russians have captured, they never develop them. They make these Potemkin villages like they're trying to do now with Mariupol. So they try to build some buildings, and then they just show those, like, we are rebuilding Mariupol. It's going to be better than ever before. But if you look at all these regions like Chechnya, they have really nice city Grozny. They put a lot of money to Grozny, but if you go outside of Grozny, it's basically a wasteland. It's poverty and so on. And if you go to the Kuril Isles, it's extremely poor. There are no infrastructure developments being done. So if there in this tragic case that Ukraine, sorry, if in this tragic case that Russia actually manages to get some land from Ukraine, these areas will probably remain very undeveloped. So they will basically, there will be extreme poverty, no infrastructure, and so on. So it's a real tragedy if it happens.
I don't know if you come across this when Berlin was divided for East and West, and people from the East were asking through connections or through those who actually could cross the border, bring coffee. Because in the East Berlin, under the Soviet occupation, after the World War II, they didn't have decent coffee. It's not about sort of like big event things. It's just to satisfy your basic needs. People didn't have. This is what sort of Ruski Mir or Russian world brings to those who they capture. And coming back to your wall and the people you describe and researching them, I understand some of them are useful idiots, and it's the part of the game, you can't avoid them. But is there someone whom you sort of like you would classify as the evil genius, who knows what he or she is doing, and they are fascinating in their sort of this cooperation or spreading Russian propaganda to the extent that you would like to meet this person like somewhere, and have this personal access or um, check-in basically, because personal meeting is different from everything we see on media or reading or listening from them about them.
I'm not sure if I would like to meet any of these people. I think I consider most of them greedy. I don't think there's very strong ideology. Like if you look at people like uh, Ian Miles Chong, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a Malaysian guy who writes columns for RT. Also, I think he works for Elon now, and he's mainly working on X uh, slash Twitter today. One of the most disliked people I've ever ran into. I don't think anybody really likes him. But my view is that he's mostly doing it for money. And then if you look at people like Kim.com, he has more money than he probably ever needs, but he has this anger towards the US and NATO and so on. So he's just basically doing things out of spite. So he's like ego driven probably there. Um, but yeah, I'm just trying to think of people who I would like to meet and talk to. I don't think it would be a very good conversation because I feel like, especially today, the society is so polarized that it's very difficult to kind of approach another person who fully disagrees with you on these matters and have a good conversation. I don't think no one will change their minds and no one will be coming to the conversation with an open mind. So uh, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a person I would like to talk to. Well,
Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
I
you've
cannot come
run
up
out.
with. I'll let you know if during this conversation I can think of someone, but right now, not really.
Okay, then let's flip it a bit different. So the viewers, the audience coming to my podcast, they are from the UK, US, Australia, Canada, sometime New Zealand, and obviously some European countries, but it depends on the topic. So can we name the people to be aware of? Like they are no um, good guys, or they are not trying to look objectively, or we shouldn't trust them. For example, those people who have affiliation, or they working with these countries or part of these countries. For example, Elon Musk in the US. He's Vatnik, isn't he?
Well, that's my take. I think he is because he is. So definition and from my book of a Vatnik is somebody who uh, spreads and or supports Kremlin propaganda or Kremlin viewpoints. So Kremlin has these big main lines of thinking that are they are quite simple, like anti-NATO. CIA is responsible for all the revolutions around the world, and so on. Uh, so if somebody deliberately spreads and or supports these views, I consider them to be a Vatnik. And if we look at Elon Musk and his activities, I think this kind of fills the criteria for this. But I think we need to add that Starlink has been a massive aid to Ukraine. It has been extremely useful tool for communication and for fighting against the Russian invaders. But since then, he's kind of slid into this area of anti-Ukraine, pro-Kremlin thinking, and he's even shared memes, anti-Zelensky memes
Mhm.
created by Russian troll farms. And this is the kind of situation. And he's talked about this Ruchev's mistake of giving Crimea to Ukraine. He actually used those words, which is
Mhm.
kind of like nobody outside of Russia really uses that term. And he spread the peace suggestion from David Sachs, which basically would have been a capitulation of Ukraine in many ways, or just giving up regions. Uh, so yeah, I think Elon Musk is a Vatnik, and I will as it's also in my book, and I will stand by that definition.
How about British politicians? How many Vatniks among them are there names?
Well, Nigel Farage,
Example,
of course.
yes, 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 I was going to ask, is here because he was praising Putin so many times and blaming West. The West provoked Russian invasion to Ukraine. Twisted logic. Well, what can you expect?
Yeah, and Nigel has been working for RT. I think he got like £500,000. Uh, yeah, over £500,000. I'm not sure if this was confirmed, but I think it was from Russian state. He was a very strong driver for Brexit. Another person behind this was, of course, Aaron Banks, who was mostly kind of funding the whole thing. Maybe you remember because you were living in the UK back
I am
then.
in the UK. Yeah.
Okay. And then, I mean, there are these kind of figures from the past, like Graham Phillips, who's not really, I think he's being accused of crimes now in the UK. Uh, Vanessa Beeley has been there for a long time. She's like old school Vatnik, but mostly talking about Syria these days, pro-Assad. Of course, Andrew and Tristan Tate, the Tates, they are, even though they live in Romania now, but I suppose that I assume that they will be relocating to the UK at some point and will try to get into politics or whatever. Tommy Robinson, so a lot of people, Roger Waters, uh,
How about
so
this?
many.
Yes. How about this Russell Brand?
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry, I forgot. Russell Brand definitely. He miraculously became religious after he was accused of sexual crimes, sex crimes. So, I mean, it Christ is king, as uh, and so on. But I mean, yeah, so those probably are the best known figures. And also, if you look at Russell Brand, you look at Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson, they are now strongly being supported by many American, like MAGA Republicans and people who are affiliated with. So Elon Musk was strongly supporting Farage before, but not anymore. He's still strongly supporting Tommy Robinson. Um, and yeah, there's a very strong connection between the US political actors and the UK political actors that I consider to be Vatniks.
Now it's the tricky part. So, what do you think about the so-called Russian opposition? On one hand, they declaring in front of cameras against Putin. When they have interviews, they say it's Putin's war. It's no Russian war. It's sort of some of them, some of them saying, "Oh, Putin didn't destroy the center of Kiev. Of course he can, but he's too kind, or he's considerate, or things like that." And these people, they have all the attributes being of the Russian opposition, and they call themselves that. And sort of, and especially Twitter, the area where you are the keen and looking into it. So, what do you think about it?
Um, I don't think there's Russian opposition. I think the opposition was crushed a long time ago. There are people who live in the West whose foot is other foot is still in Russia, and they are thinking about their political future in Russia. They think that they cannot say that it's Russia's war. They have to say it's Putin's war, because if they say that it's Russia's war, they basically attack against their own country. And if they want to create a political future in Russia, they cannot say. They cannot. That would destroy their popularity, their credibility in Russia. So they'll have to. It's like what the Kremlin does in Ukraine. They blame the regime. So these people basically do the same thing. It's Putin and his regime that's evil, but I think we still have to remember that a lot of this, if you ask from Russians themselves, many of them support the war. So it is Russia's war. A lot of them, there are no demonstrations or protests and so on. They don't have the critical mass to protest against the war, which is kind of telling that they actually support the war. It is bringing more jobs. It is bringing more money. The salaries are going up. So it's actually right now, because Russia is in war economy, it's actually good for the country. Of course, it's temporary, but still, it's like good thing. So why would they complain? Because they never see the war. They don't see the bodies. They don't see, except in the poor areas, regions where the soldiers are coming from. But in the big cities, they don't even see or notice the war. It's not there. So it is Russia's war, and as long as the Russian so-called opposition doesn't say this out loud, I don't think they are the opposition, because it's you kind of have to, if you oppose the war, you have to clearly say that it's also Russia's war.
So how to protect our brains from Russian narrative, and especially, with the new President Trump, with possible peace negotiation within 24 hours, as we all were promised. And it's quite slippery slate, isn't it? Sort of like not to follow those things, especially if you're no Finnish, no Ukrainian, and your house or the borders of your country quite far away. So how would you sort of like build this defense for the brain and keep your critical thinking intact and not falling into any narratives? So-called opposition, useful idiots in the Western countries. What's the recipe?
Um, it's not a simple recipe. It takes time. I think we have to integrate a lot of this kind of critical thinking and media literacy into the education system. It's expensive. It takes time. It takes 10 years before we see any results, or 15 years. That's the long-term solution. Uh, but okay, I'm gonna suggest something that I've never said before. Uh, I think we need to tell better stories. I think the Kremlin propagandists and spin doctors, their stories are very compelling. People are fascinated by conspiracy theories, and they create very good stories, very compelling stories that are effective in the West. I think we need to tell better stories. We need to tell stories of liberal democracies. We need to tell stories how barbaric their invasion is, how much damage they have done, the abduction of children, the kidnappings and everything, like brainwashing the kids to work for this fascist regime. Uh, we have to come up with better stories so that we can kind of beat their stories. Of course, there's a lot of, like, civil society plays a very important role here. So we have to counter their bullshit with, I don't know, humor is a good weapon, for example. But I think we need to focus more on this kind of telling the stories of liberal democracies, freedom of speech, and so on, because that's what makes the West so great, in my view.
I know you're based in Ukraine at the moment, aren't you?
No.
Oh, because I was trying to. So, but you go into Ukraine on and off.
Uh,
There was some pictures on your social media, and I thought, sort of you in Ukraine. And my next question was sort of like if you like about Ukraine, what do you like about it? And what resonates with you? Because we're on different sort of like different borders of Russia. Um, but we have so many in common because of that and because of other things. And so I was hoping to come to the point.
Okay. I've been to Ukraine once.
Uh-huh.
That was in Crimea, in Yalta, in 1986.
Oh, wow.
So I was 4 years old when went there. So I haven't been going to Ukraine that much. I will go this year. Finally, it's been like a long time coming. I love Ukrainians. I love Ukrainian culture, and when we went there, it was already like the Soviet Union was collapsing. There was absolutely nothing there. People were buying clothes from us, like me and my siblings, and there was this like amusement park. Every day we went to the amusement park, but it was always closed. So every day I was crying because it was closed. But I mean, it was the final days of the Soviet Union. But I still love the place, and there we met at this dance group who later came to. I think they danced Hopak.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They came to Finland to visit us, and I just kind of felt this very close connection with these people. And this, like, for a long time, I've had this feeling of connection to Ukraine and Ukrainians, and that's why I also felt this strong urge to defend, like, fight against the Russian invasion. But yeah, this year I already have a few trips coming up to Ukraine, so I can finally visit the beautiful country
Oh,
again.
yeah. Well, good luck with your trips, and I'm sure it will be fantastic as long as you stay safe. But it's a big curious thing. When I'm in Ukraine, I actually don't feel the danger. Sort of if I'm in Kiev and there's air raids, and obviously I'm going to the corridor where there are no windows because if there's a blast, the main rule is stay away from the windows, a corridor or bathroom. But it doesn't make me shiver. Maybe because I didn't go through this. Maybe because I'm going to the war, nor the war coming to me. And even when I was in Pokrovsk in summer 23, we had missiles. So, phew, zhew. It happens so quickly. You really don't have the time. It's actually being frightened. You just kind of like mobilized. The body, the mind is just getting in a special mode, and you just like, you know, uh, keep going. Good luck with your trips to Ukraine. Thank you very much for finding time, talking, and sharing your insights, and just endless gratitude for your job because it's so exhausting, but it's kind of it's like your mission. It's not really a job, it's mission in life. So thank you for doing this because I'm sure you do big difference for many people across the world. And I wish you lots of energy and inspiration to keep doing, and please stay safe.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, and we just let me know if you want to do this again. It's
Oh,
been really
definitely.
great.
Definitely. Propaganda is one of my favorite aspects to cover. Thank you very much. Have a great day and keep in touch.
Yeah, you too. Yes.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.
We discussed propaganda, Russian narratives within different countries through different speakers, useful idiots, and those people who do it deliberately for money or other personal reasons. Please let me know what you think. Share your thoughts. Do you agree? You disagree? And if you have access to Vatnik's book, or I'm sure you can go just on the website, it's fascinating reading. And this work, you might think it's sort of too much information or might be boring. No, it's not. I came across Vatnik Soup, and that was fascinating reading just for myself. And this is how I come up with the idea to do this interview. And then preparing for this interview is actually quite exciting and enlightening. So have a look. Let me know what you think. Let's discuss. Very interesting to hear your thoughts. And thank you again for liking, sharing, and supporting my podcast. And I remind you again now, we publish the interviews on Sunday, 6 o'clock in the evening, and we have two lives during the week. On Monday, 7:30, we're discussing the follow-up, it's the interview, and on Thursday, we're looking at the things happen, the current affairs, things to discuss, and let's keep in touch. And thank you, being for my amazing community. Thank you for being here and all your kindness, all your support. I appreciate it big time. Thank you for watching. Stay safe. Thank you. Bye.